Najljepše vam želim i dobrodošlicu u još jedno druženje u okviru centralnog programa prvog internacionalnog festivala književnosti Bookstan. Večeras imamo zadovoljstvo da se družimo sa našim gostom, autorom Ravijom Hageom i Johnom Freemanom, kog ste već imali priliku upoznati, kritičarem, urednikom i autorom. Ravi je čovjek koji dijeli slično iskustvo koje smo i mi ovdje imali. Rođen je u Bejrutu gdje je proveo 9 godina tokom građanskog rata. Nakon toga je otišao u Montreal. On je pisac i vizuelni umjetnik. Višestruko je nagrađivan za svoje djela. U izdanju Bajbuka su također nagrađivana djela Žohar i Denirova igra objavljena. Ima iskustvo taksiste koje je iskoristio za svoj najnoviji roman, što opet negdje podsjeća na iskustva bosansko-hercegovačkih umjetnika i umjetnica bilo kojih profila koji su u jednom trenutku bili u egzilu i koji su radili neke poslove za koje se nisu školovali i koje nisu planirali. Ukoliko niste do sada upoznali našeg gosta domaćina Johna Freemana, John je jedan od najznačajnijih američkih kritičara, urednika, autora sa vlastitim djelima prevedenim na više od 20 jezika. Kako to kaže s razlogom naš ovogodišnji kurator Aleksandar Hemon, sigurno trenutno najbolji poznavalac savremene literature napisane na engleskom jeziku. Nadam se da ćete s nama biti u 21 sat kada predstavljamo našu Momunu Altavi, Amerikanku egipatskog porijekla sa kojom će razgovarati opet naša Amila Futurović. Želim vam ugodno druženje.
Thank you to Damir and Amira and Amila for bringing us all here, to Alexander Hemon for coordinating this festival, and to all of you for coming. It gives me a lot of pleasure to be here on stage with Rawi Hage, one half of the Too Deep Lebanese contingent here at Bookstan this year. And it gives me a great deal of pleasure to be here with him to launch his book, De Niro's Game, which is his second book to be translated into Bosnian. You will know him from the novel Cockroach, which was a Giller Prize finalist. A novel set in Montreal about an unnamed narrator who has emigrated to that city, who's spending a lot of time with lowlifes, down-and-out types, who has a relationship with an Iranian woman who is being chased from her past by something dark, as is the narrator, who is, to some degree, I to diagnose him from a psychologist's seat, suffering from a degree of post-traumatic stress. That was Rawi Hage's second novel. His third novel, Carnival, which is not yet translated into Bosnian, is set in an unnamed Latin American city during a festival, carnival, and it's narrated from the perspective of a taxi driver who's driving around the city during a period in which there's serial killings taking place in other taxis. But the book which brought him here, the book which I think launched his career, the book which I think marveled many of us, the book that made us believe that it was possible that Celine could have been born in Beirut, is this book, De Niro's Game, which is a novel set in Beirut during the Civil War about two friends, Bassam and George. They're cousins. They're in probably their late teens. It's during the most terrible part of the Lebanese Civil War. They're low on money. They're coming up with schemes to rob a casino, to do petty crimes. And gradually, over the course of this novel, they take similar but different paths in how to deal with the violence and the terrible situation that was Beirut in this period. And it is one that Rawi Hage knew well. He was born in 1964 in Beirut and spent 9 years there during the Civil War. He left, he grew up partly in Cyprus, but he left in 1984 and moved to New York, where he worked in a shop, which I'll ask him about later, and he found his way to Montreal, where he worked, among other things, as a taxi driver. You can see De Niro as a theme in his life. But we know him now as a novelist. I want to welcome him here. Please join your hands in saying welcome to Rawi Hage. Rawi, yesterday in my conversation with Sasha, I described how you and Rabi Alameddin will sometimes trade jokes at length stupid one-line jokes, which are actually quite funny. And since we're probably not going to laugh for another 45 minutes, I wonder if you could...
Don't be so sure.
I wonder if you could relay one of these jokes and explain its origin.
Oh, I can't remember them. Were they sexual by nature? They must have been sexual. I can't remember them at all. I'm sorry.
Okay,
They'll be odd in
You
it.
do the one that you told today about the sun,
About the sun?
about the rocket going to the sun.
Oh, we're not going to start with offensive jokes.
Oh, yes, we can.
Anyway, we have a competition going on. If you look, Rabia has these elaborate glasses, and today I wore these glasses and trying to compete with Rabia, but I guess he's more fabulous than I am. Yeah, these jokes. Okay, here's a joke. A fundamentalist tells his assistant, he says, the American reached the moon, we're gonna reach the sun. And the guy said, Your Highness, we can't reach the sun, we'll burn. And the fundamentalist said, you idiot, we'll just go at night.
When I heard you tell those jokes, I remember one that Robbie told back in reply to you, which is that three blondes were in a car in Florida on their way to Disneyland, and they saw a sign that said Disneyland left, so they went home.
Can I use it next time? It's pretty good.
I want to talk to you about the structure of this novel. All three of your novels have used a kind of funhouse mirror to reflect what's happening. In Cockroach, it is Kafka's story about Gregor Samsa, who believes he wakes up as a cockroach, and your narrator in that novel believes he is half cockroach. In Carnival, the sort of reflecting mirror is the festival of Carnival. And in this novel, it is the film The Deer Hunter, in which Robert De Niro and Christopher Walken play that idiotic game of Russian roulette with a gun. And I wonder why you chose this as a sort of funhouse mirror for the Civil War.
And Camus.
Oh yes.
Strange étranger. I don't know. I think there's always reference to other books in my work. Maybe it's a statement. I think in the West, I think to a certain extent, the minority writers, if I qualify, there are certain expectations. Either you have to write folkloric or journalistic. Either you have to do, mention the bread and the tabbouleh 5 times, or explain the situation, explain where you come from, what happened, why you're here. The elsewhere is always expected. Ironically enough, I think Rabia agrees. I think my third novel is what I consider probably my deepest novel, and the reception was mixed. Some of the critic were that I was self-indulgent, etc., because there were so many references to other books and literature, etc., or at least that was my tent. Does that come from that sense of defiance, maybe, but naturally I rotate to other books when I'm writing my book. I don't know if that's legitimate or not, but that what usually happens. Yeah.
Of course, books are all made of other books.
Yeah, I guess some people are privileged to, are allowed to do that. Other people have, other writers have different expectation from certain readers.
In the reviews of this book, one of the things that's remarkable is Rawi Hage's language, which is gritty and poetic at the same time, which has long internal flights. Your narrator has internal reveries, and over the course of the novel, some of these fracture his consciousness. I don't want to really too much about the plot, but The plot of the book is also extremely well developed. In some ways you could call this book a thriller. It is extremely well plotted. And in one of the reviews, a critic noted that these two things do not often go together, that you either do language and style or you do plot, but you don't do both. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the assembly of this book and why it felt necessary for you to plot it almost as a spy novel, and to bring a sense of forward momentum into a novel that is also remembering and bearing witness to a terrible past.
I think De Niro's Game is not a chronicle of the war. It's more a chronicle of the corruption that surfaced during the war. I'm sure people here relate. During the war, there's a strata that surface, and it's almost legitimate. It's a class issue. I grew up in a lower middle class neighborhood, which was in proximity to a poor neighborhood, and I witnessed how the poor slowly during the war took hold of the city. I mean, there was a mobility almost, and by joining the army, by concentrating all the wealth in the militias. At the beginning of the war, there were intelligent, educated people who participated, but slowly they left. And all that was left, the people who took hold of the city and the parties, etc., are people who were less fortunate. So it is mostly about corruption. And I watched how, or at least I witnessed as a kid, how wars moved from an ideological enterprise to a more mafia-like enterprise. And actually, I think that was the end of the Lebanese war. The Lebanese war ended when there was a consensus by the international community to end the war. They invited all the war lords and the militia people, and they guarantee them that they'll still have the same income, and they'll make them legitimate with position in the government, etc. And then that's when the war started. In terms of plot, I can't remember writing this book, and I wrote it very fast. I wrote it in about a month. It came very natural to me. I started writing short stories, and I started writing this book, and it kept on growing. And this is not bragging, but it still surprised me till now. There was very little change in the plot, so it came naturally. I think there are two sides to this book. There is the Lebanese war, and then there is the migration. The protagonist eventually goes to Paris, and he dealt with the issue of immigration. He felt that he was a foreigner. So in a way, it was an introduction to Cockroach in that sense. So there was that continuity to the books.
And at that point of the book, I don't want to get that far ahead into it, but you see the corruption that is happening in Lebanon and within Beirut is also being orchestrated and reinforced by corruption from abroad. Sort of by the powers that are intervening in the war, that are arming militias, that are putting
That's
money.
the history of that place. We were always the proxy nation. The Christian had alliances with the French, the Sunni with the Turks, now Saudi Arabia, the Shiite with Iran. So in that sense, we had a great period of coexistence, but our tragedy is, our richness is because we're probably like here, we're very multicultural, multi-sectarian, but that's also our Achilles heel. It always came out to that. Outside forces always knew the weakness of Lebanon. has its sectarian history, and that's basically the reason for this civil war.
Do you feel any need? I was on stage with Sasha last night, and many of Sasha's books, without being nostalgic, are attempt to remember Sarajevo before the war. And I wonder if you have any instinct as a writer, not so much in this book, to remember Beirut before the war, and if not, what your memories were of it.
I don't remember Beirut before the war. The war started, I was 9 years old, but I know what Beirut represented as a mythology and as a place. Beirut, it was an important place for the Middle East, always was, and I think still is. What Beirut provided is kind of a safe haven for many exiles of the region. So all the cultural renaissance that happened in Beirut, us Lebanese can claim some of it, but it's also, there was a lot of outside contributions. Many of the intellectual writers, artists who were exiled from Iraq, Syria, came and lived in Beirut. Actually, it was a passage. Beirut was always a passage. Many of them end up in Paris, from Adonis to Munif, you name it, everybody passed through Beirut. So in that sense, that's basically Beirut's contribution. It was a democracy, or what I call a pseudo-democracy. And compared to, and that's where it comes, I think, the Lebanese sense of superiority. It was a democracy. It was something very rare in the region. You had freedom of press, many universities, a vibrant intellectual community, and I was going to say something, I forgot. Yeah, help me out.
Let's phone a friend.
But Beirut had its weaknesses, of course.
Growing up, going to school, where was your intellectual center? As in, when you read novels in school and you began to read them outside of school, were you reading novels written by Lebanese writers? Were you reading novels in translation?
No, I know my name sounds very, has a religious connotation, Hage, but I come from a Christian background. My father was a Catholic, my mother was Orthodox. I went to Catholic school. In the process, we learned French. All the materials were learned in French, but we spoke Arabic and we learned Arabic literature and grammar. So I was taught by many Jesuit priests. We had to read French literature. It was actually imposed on us. And Arabic poetry, not Arabic literature for some reason. We had to remember poems, long Arabic poems.
Do you still remember them?
Not really. I know a couple, but I'm not gonna say. I think if I started one, I will finish it. I know Al-Mutanabbi, Al-Khayl wal-Layl wal-Bayda, Muna, I have a German friend. He knows this a couple of the beginning of that verse, and every time he sees himself in an Arabic surrounding, he says Al-Khayl wal-Layl wal-Bayda, and everybody continues these two verses. He plays it. Okay. But yeah, so I studied, the poetic, I think, in my writing certainly comes from this exposure to Arabic poetry. But yeah, I read mostly French literature. My French translator accused me of being a French writer. She tells me, "Je te rétablis," meaning I'm re-establishing you in French. He thinks I'm a French writer. I don't know how I feel about that.
So the novel is about Bassam, who works in the port, and George, his cousin, who works at a casino. And George comes up with a scheme in which they will put credit onto a casino machine, and then when Bassan comes in and plays on that machine and cashes out, he'll take more money than he's put in, and he's due. And this starts an escalating series of risks throughout the novel that they're taking, and the Christian militia control the casinos. So this isn't a small risk; it's a life and death risk. And what's interesting about the novel is over the course of its pages, as the life and death risks get bigger, the emotional risks that they take. It's not so much George, but Bassam, who's dating a woman, Rana, who's a quote-unquote good girl, who wants to be betrothed, her parents want her married, and he starts to take bigger risks with her and bigger risks with her dignity. And I wonder if...
Mona, she's a hardcore feminist here.
I wonder if in writing this, you're thinking a tiny bit about the way that a catastrophic environment, which kaleidoscopically presents abuses of power and the example that opportunism is the way to survive, has an effect on individual person-to-person morality.
Like I said, I think all the resources were concentrated in one place at one point. If you're not part of the militia, like any dictatorship or any despotic regime, I think the wealth gets concentrated in one place. And if you're from not a certain strata, the only way to get money is to join the militia. I have cousins who joined. I have people next door who joined, and the attraction was not one ideological attraction. A lot of time it was money, power, driving car, banal things. I have a cousin who joined because he has the chance to join, to drive a jeep or seduced by a gun. People join for the most benign reasons. Yeah, there's something very Manichaean about the novel. There's George who wants to stay and be part. He was more ideological, and Bassam who just wanted to leave. And I think these are where we were left with these two options: it's either you join or you leave. And people who didn't want to join also had their many reasons. Either you're afraid, or you're not fully convinced by the cause. My mother family, many of my uncles have to run away because though they were Christians, but they were leftist or nationalist, pan-Arab, so they lived on the other side. And my mother was not convinced. So, so in the family we had that schism. Many people were not convinced. And later, when the war started, we realized how many people were not really convinced by what the Christian militia stood for. So there's always these varieties. It wasn't so black and white. It's always gray, but the gray always takes setback. You have to be almost, even if you're not with them, you're against them. But it's always that thing. So even the gray zones were looked upon suspiciously. I know an intellectual Lebanese who was reading the Safir, which was leftist newspaper, and he was arrested, interrogated, etc. So yeah, it was not really so black and white during the war. I don't know if I answered your question.
Do you remember your parents arguing about it?
I remember my uncles at the beginning of the war having big discussions in the family and fighting with my father. I remember my other uncle, who's the brother of my father, joined the Socialist Party because his wife was from the Druze region, and he was at the time Christian, voted for Jumblat, Kamal Jumblat, who was more of a feudal figure than a political figure. So he he joined the Social Party, and then he had to leave. So we left in the early war. So the family, yeah, I guess it's very. I guess I'm in the right place to talk about these things. It's very. I'm sure people are nodding. They understand these family divisions that happens because of war. Yeah.
My girlfriend is Lebanese, as you know, and lived in Beirut during the Civil War, and they left Beirut to go to Brumana, which is a town which exists in this book too, which is north of Beirut, and they left when the head of the Deuxième Bureau came and informed them he was going to move into their apartment. And that's how things work. The Deuxième Bureau is the security state, and I wonder if you could talk about the circumstances of your family's departure and how it happened.
We left gradually. My eldest brother left to study like a good Lebanese to become an engineer. He left to the States. It was the family who kind of collected a bit of money and they sent him. Then I left. And I ended up also in the state, but I didn't live with my brother.
Did you get a visa? How did you leave?
I prefer not to talk about that. Yeah, some kind of visa. And I stayed. Yeah.
You landed in New York in 1984.
Yeah.
Not exactly the best time in New York City.
It was more exciting than now.
That is true. What happened when you landed?
I arrived, my brother was living in a dormitory, school dormitory, and he was so much anecdotes. I apologize for all the academics and intellectuals among you, but here I can't find anecdotes now, and stories. I arrived, my brother was an RA, responsible for the floor, and he would give me a pass every day, and we shared the same room. Till, of course, they caught me. First they thought I'm his lover, but then they realized I'm his brother, so that's different. And they chased me, so I went and I stayed in Brooklyn with two Mexican guys. Shared the room with two Mexican guys, and then I started working. I called my father once. It was hard to call Lebanon back then. And I said, he said, what are you doing? I said, I'm looking for a job. He said, go, there's a merchant I know. He was Jewish Lebanese. Go look him up, and maybe, I know he has stores, and maybe he'll give you a job. So he had a store in Flatbush Avenue, which was at the time Haitian, Jamaican immigrants. And he sold all kind of knickknacks, gifts, like porcelain elephants, beads, winking Jesus. That was our bestseller. That was, it was still in the 80s. People bargain. It was like I did ganja, went to parties with Jamaicans, the whole thing. Rap, people, with the big box, boom box they call it. So I had that, and so I became part of the neighborhood. It was still that community neighborhood. And then I moved on. I worked in the warehouses, etc. Briefly in a bank as a messenger. Survived.
What were you reading at the time? I'm curious. I'm just trying to understand your development as an artist.
Well, I knew very little English, so I started reading books, literature. Yeah, I read in English. So I read the whole Russian canons.
You started with the easy stuff, right?
No, I was already a reader. Yeah, the easy stuff. But I had this affiliation to the Russians. They understand misery. I think the Russians are the real existentialists. It's not the French. I think the French claims a lot of things, but the real existentialists are the Russians. and they're Easterners too. So you know, I read Gogol, I read Turgenev, I read Dostoevsky. You know.
In Russian?
I wish. No, not so fortunate in English. And you know, and I think I proved that. So here I am, this working class who speak English, literary English. So it was confusing, I guess. Tragic.
See, last night at the opening party, I met two students here who were studying comparative literature. They're sitting in the third row, and the first name they brought up was Gogol. You mentioned misery as something that the Russians understood. But I wonder...
And humor, I apologize. I agree with Sasha. You know, yesterday he gave a great description about, you know, Eastern European humor. And I understand it, and I fully understand it. It was something very interesting when he said that in the West, humor is a category in its own, but here it's fused with tragedy and comedy is one, which I thought was brilliant. But I also wonder if that's not the consequences of something else. I think society who either very religious or were subjugated to totalitarian regime, presenting humor as an individual autonomous form is dangerous. I think humor is threatening. If you look at the whole canon of Abrahamic literature, there is not one. There is not a joke in the Bibles, in the New Testament, or in the Quran, for that matter. Not one joke. So I think humor is subversive, and when you are subjugated to conservative society, I think humor has to be fused, and self-deprecation becomes a form of security. I think before I make fun of you or I proclaim that I'm actually creating comedy, look, I'm making fun of myself.
Yeah, I beat you to the punch.
So yeah, I think you know, it's no wonder that the Greeks, you know, categorized that comedy tragedy, because it was a democracy. There was certain freedom, so you can present humor as a humor. You can actually laugh at the gods. But unfortunately, I don't know. We're blessed with this Abrahamic religion. They're funny. They are funny though, but they don't produce humor.
There's a very amusing scene in the novel about a third of the way in, and George has joined the Christian militia against Basam's strong reservations, and they go up. I assume they're up in the mountains somewhere, and they're at a fortified front, and George, or someone that George is in the militia with, tries to give Basam a gun to shoot at the other side. And he says, no. He says, no, it's okay, I know that guy. And they start shouting insults at each other. An escalating series of comical insults about their mother's private parts and their sister's private parts.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there was dialogue between militia. Yeah, there was the proximity was so small. They talked to each other. They knew each other by name, and you know, they insulted each other. Yeah. Beirut is small. It's a compact city, 1.5 million. Now I think with the Syrian refugees, probably about 2.5 million, or 2 million. I don't know. But yeah, the war is not like the grand European war of trenches and distance itself. It's a civil war. You guys know.
And I wonder if you could just, while we're on Beirut for a second, you know, for all the people here who haven't been there, you know, just can you describe what it's like now, and how it feels to return?
Well, we all have this love-hate relationship with Beirut, but I think it's still an important city. There is still freedom that you don't find anywhere in the region, I think, in Beirut. Whether that freedom comes from this, what I call pseudo-democracy, or from chaos, I don't know. It's probably from chaos. But it's still, it is the gay capital Arab of the world. You still have 4, 5, 6 clubs. Periodically you get some priest who gets, gango, he wants to kill homosexuals, etc., or, and they abuse them. But also there's resistance. Some priests complain and they send the police and they arrest a few guys. There was an uproar, actually. There was an uproar from the diaspora and uproar from inside. And it was very admirable. There is resistance, there's a social, there's a civil society that's very strong. But at the end, if you don't have weapons, there's very little you can do. And I don't think we're willing to carry weapons, certainly not the Lebanese. But at the end, you have militias who, when it comes to shove, they're willing to use force.
Talk a little bit more about how the militias are present. When I last went there, a friend of a friend of a friend picked us up at the airport, and we drove in a Range Rover at illegal speeds to a hotel, moving cars off the road. In Beirut. And I realized that it was not someone from the army who had picked us up, it was someone from a militia. And I wonder what that ability to use the threat of force at all times does to a city. Even if it's not used, but if it's displayed and deployed, what that does to the way that the city gets along with itself.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be cautious. Yeah, you have to be. There is a hegemony by these militias. They're still there. They can kill people with total impunity. It happens all the time. They walk in these convoys, right? And they all have dark cars and dark windows, etc. And they shoot in the air, and everybody has to. You have to think of them like, ambulances.
Less benevolent ambulances.
Yes. The threat is still there. It's still a militaristic place, and the possibility of another war is still there. But I think the international community needs Beirut. Beirut always played a function, even during the war. They need journalists to go and drink. They need prostitution. It's a big, something you don't know about Beirut, it's a big secret service place. And secret services, they tend to talk to each other, they're not so divided. I mean, we're naive to think that secret services are ideological. They're not, they're pragmatic. So, Westerners that can come and when they go to Iraq to report and come have a drink in Beirut, and so it's what I consider it's a Westerner place. Actually, this is another anecdote. I was in Germany and I was going to Beirut, and there was this German neighbor who was sitting outside, and I said to him, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to Beirut. You should come one day." And next day, he's German. He booked a ticket and he said, "I'm coming." I was just inviting him. I was being Lebanese, I said, "Come." And he's a photographer, and he arrived to Beirut, and he said, "I can't photograph anything. This city is too Western." So I guess he wanted the exotic thing he couldn't find. It's a seemingly Western place on the surface, but has very, very entrenched conservative elements too. It's a funny combination of theocracy, despotic state, feudal, liberal, to a certain extent, very religious place, prestigious, etc. it's a very complex place. It's not, yeah, many powers trying to, trying to dominate. I don't know if Beirut unify, or Lebanon unify, what would happen. In a way, yeah, we complain, but we're also afraid. If there is a strong government, centrist government, it might turn to a dictatorship like the rest of the region. So, yeah, that chaos, that multiplicity works for us. But I don't know how long we can sustain this luxury.
You were talking about working in warehouses in New York in the 1980s and reading the Russians and smoking a bit of ganja. You mentioned your friend, the German, was a photographer. You're also a photographer, and you have photographs that are in museums in Canada. When did you start taking pictures, and what were you taking pictures of, and why?
I started taking pictures in Beirut, actually. I should put this in one of my books, but me and my cousin, we chased bombs, taking photos. We decided that we want to take photographs of the bomb falling. And we used to take my father's car and chase bombs and sit in places where bombs are falling to get a photo of a bomb in the air.
Did you ever get one?
No. If I got one, we'd be dead, I guess. Yeah, we decided to, we just roam the streets, poor parents. And that was my first encounter with photography. Then I moved to New York and I met a Lebanese photographer who later on became a Buddhist, Indian guy, does yoga, totally, vegetarian, the whole kit. And he asked me to help him in darkroom. I remember seeing the first image surfacing, and I said, "This is what I want to do." When I put one of his first images in the developer and kind of surface of black and white, I was blown away. It was magical.
It's ghostly, right?
Yeah, it was ghostly, and I think that was the moment where I, gravitated towards art.
I think it's affected your style. I mean, far be it from him to describe it, but it is beautifully imagistic, and it's uncommonly imagistic. And you could call it poetic, but I wondered in reading it how much of the influence of that was from the way you regard the world with your eyes.
Probably. I won't flatter myself like that, but I
can.
Yeah.
It's Lebanese, right?
Well, yeah, right. Boastfulness is part of the culture, right? There's a whole repertoire in Arabic poetry which is boasting himself. So it's not. Actually, you find it also in rap music. Arabs and rappers, Arab poets and rappers have something very in common. It's boastfulness. Anyway,
I hope the photographer got you in that pose.
I think when I write, spaces are important. I imagine myself. I transplant myself in a place and I kind of observe. So in a way, I construct the immediate scene around me, and go from there. I think probably that comes from photography, because you do have to be present. You do have to, in the classical sense of photography, you have to be here with the camera. So maybe that kind of shows in the writing.
Yeah, and each one of the book progresses in a series of set pieces, little scenes that are broken apart by space, and each one of them is framed. One of the characters is George's voluptuous, quite strong-willed or aunt, I forget which.
Aunt,
and
I hope it's not mother, but yeah.
and Bassam is constantly going over there, and increasingly more on his own to explain where George is, lying on George's behalf. And throughout this, the book kind of alternates between private and public spaces. And private spaces tend to be a little bit safer than public spaces.
More elaborate.
Yeah,
more elaborate. There's the speed scene, the passage. I think happens in public spaces, where more the contemplation and the poetry happen in private spaces. But I think I'm a big fan of Fellini, and I can watch Fellini over and over again when I get inspired. And the set, these compartmentalizing kind of sets that, and each character has a potential to be a myth on its own, creation of mythology, and it's fantastic. It's fantastic.
And as the book goes on, one of the things that struck me is at one point Bassam has to buy a gun, and he goes to visit a friend, and his friend's mother greets him at the door, and he asks after her health. They go into the house. She offers him a cold drink, apologizing for not having ice. This in a city that's basically under siege, and there's virtually no power. And throughout the novel, when they're in private spaces where there's families, there's never a break in traditional manners.
Oh.
And I wonder if that was your experience of the war.
Yeah. I mean, it changed now. But I think me and Rabia, we grew up in these confinement. It's very mannered, there are traditions. Under this kind of, Beirut, like I said, it's still a tradition. It's still a conservative society. It's still a traditional society. If I compare it a bit, I compare it to the Japanese. There's a lot of exuberance, but there's also codes. And in Beirut, there's codes. I mean, my mother used to send me under the bombs because some person is coming and they smoke certain. She used to have this tray with about 100, or I'm exaggerating, maybe 10 packs of cigarette, different labels. And she knows each neighbor what they smoke. So if somebody's coming and she doesn't have that particular label, I have to go and pick up that particular label of cigarette brand, because you're ashamed, or you're not host, you're not a good host. Yeah, there's formalities that we grew up with. It's still there. Yeah, it's oppressive. I think it's oppressive.
But to those formalities, Kamala Shamsi will remember this. I was in Lahore, in Pakistan, about 5 years ago. This was in a period of very elaborate political violence. I think on the day that I was there was 25 or 30 people killed in various militia-type shootings of each other. And I went to a party after an event for the magazine I was editing at the time. And the party was in one of the most lavish houses I've ever been in. A sort of cement block, sprawling thing. And I was greeted by two servants, very dark-skinned individuals wearing elaborate uniforms, who came out with silver trays covered in a variety of cigarette packets. Yeah. And I wonder if during times of conflict, if small gestures like that are increasingly important, because there are other things you cannot control.
Probably societies that have unreliable governments tend to create their own more micro kind of laws, or it's a form of avoiding violence. Probably it is probably avoiding violence, but on an individual level, it could be very oppressive too.
New York in the 80s was a violent place. How did you experience the threat of violence or the spectacle of violence when you moved to New York, and how was that different from what you had left behind?
New York was harder, much harder. During the war, there's a community. I grew up in this neighborhood. Actually, I had a great childhood. My cousins were there, two grandmothers. Everybody's acceptable. Everybody knows you. In that sense, it was great. School was not too far. I played football. Bombs, etc.
Were you in Ashrafia? Did you live in Ashrafia?
Yeah. But New York was brutal. New York was brutal. Total shock. Yeah.
In what way?
guilt that you left your family under the bombs, and here you are. Money. I didn't have any money. I arrived with very little money, something my aunt gave me. Language. Ended up in a poor neighborhood, lived in Flatbush. And sense of isolation. I think it's sort of that experience surfaces in all my books. I think that's the most tragic experience for me. I don't know the word in French is déchirement, is to be torn. I felt it very much. And work. I became a laborer. I work in warehouses. Continuous work and so on. So it was very hard time.
When did you start writing?
I started writing in Montreal. I didn't write in English I didn't do any writing. I was a very bad student. I think I had some kind of learning disability, etc. All writers claim that. But I was a reader. I was always a reader. I like to read. My father read. My father was a big reader. My mother not. And I started writing. I participated in a show, Arab Canadian show in Toronto.
Photographers?
It was about all kind of multidisciplinary show. Anything from traditional painting to conceptual work. The show 211 was closed. We did a protest, etc. And I was asked to write something for the catalog. I did kind of write something, like a short story. And the curator was a Syrian woman, Aida Kawouk, who died, a wonderful woman. She said to me, you have a voice, you should write. And I believed her, started writing short stories. I was reading Chekhov at the time. I was like blown away by Chekhov. When my girlfriend left me, she took Chekhov, and that was like big.
You take the TV, but not Chekhov.
Yeah, not Chekhov, right? And so I started writing short stories, and I sent it a few places. A couple of them got published, and then somebody said to me, you should get, apply for a grant from the Quebec Council that might give you money. I applied and get at the time $15,000, which humongous amount of money at the time. And then I was finishing a short story, and it turns out to become the Nero's Game, and the rest is history. Had a success, and my life changed.
The book won the Impact Prize in Dublin, which is one of the most prestigious prizes in the world. And I wonder, were you... Let's slow down a tiny bit before you get to the point where your life changes forever. In that month.
Not forever, there's no guarantees in these things. Today you're here, tomorrow you're not. Yeah.
But you sound like you're okay with provisionalness.
Yeah, I am.
In that month that you're writing the book, how did you go back to the spaces of Beirut that you had left behind? And were you aware that you were sort of making a kind of city, an imaginary city, or were you trying very hard to make it as close to the city that you had lived in?
Like I said, I wrote this book very fast. So I think writers, the first book, they tend to write about the biggest trauma in your life. And it took me about 20 years to acknowledge that I lived certain trauma and start writing about it. I can't remember writing this book. There's a blank. I just sat for a few weeks and I finished it and I sent it to a friend. And he arrived to Canada, did a PhD, became a poet, taught, raised a family, extraordinary man. And then he calls me one day and he said, "My son, you have a masterpiece in your hand, just send it." And I sent it. And I sent it to a few small publishing houses, medium publishing house, big publishing house. And I received two offers. I took the offer of the publisher who invited me to lunch. And don't let me pay. And that was history.
Let's talk a little bit about food, because I think if you ask any Lebanese person, one of the things they'll say is that they come from the place that makes the best food in the world. And this book has lahambajin and labne and all kinds of food throughout it. And there's a glossary in the back in case you don't know what some of these things are. I wonder if you can talk about the role of food in the book, if it is anything other than just simply what it is in culture, or for some reason you're deploying it.
Yeah, I don't know why. I mean, there's a lot of cursing in the book. The cursing is in Arabic and the food is in Arabic.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I couldn't compromise on those, or I didn't find the equivalent translation. Cursing is amazing. It's very particular to every culture, and it's their art in itself. And I couldn't. I tried to translate it. It didn't have that same weight.
Is there a particular curse that you could translate here that seems, without staying within a PG-rated bracket of conversation, that is creatively?
Yeah, I might translate, but it does not have that same weight, like I said. I think curses are about musicality. They're about the language. They're not about the meaning.
Well, say it in Arabic and then translate it.
It means pimp. I'm gonna fuck your sister's pussy. Yeah. Sorry.
So many of them, so many of the curses have. There's a squeak from the sideline here. I want to ask you one particular thing. In the book, there's a
I heard that in Bosnian there's like the same,
yeah.
big repertoire. You should ask them to say something.
Since Mona's in the audience, I'll ask you this rather pointed question. So many of the curses in Arabic, ones that have been told me here, are often about violence against women.
Sure.
And
yeah, unfortunately they are.
And at one point, the character in this book talks about respect, and it's an interesting deflection of
dignity, when self-respect is always about the sort of how well you protect or defend your sister's.
There's a word actually for it.
What is it?
Art. Art meaning, it's like, don't touch the art. This mean, don't make passes at my sister, don't make passes at my mother. These are forbidden. Yeah. I mean, Mona knows about all this. I think you should come at 9 o'clock. I think they will explain all these intricacies much better. You get it from a real feminist activist. I'm a bit of that, yeah.
But I think because of your gender, you can't take a pass on the issue. So how do you feel about them? When you re-enter the culture and you are in a lexicon in which these values are transmitted through the language itself, how do you deflect or engage in it?
In literature or
in life?
In life. Like I said, it's not a monolithic society in Lebanon. It depends on what milieu you are. It also depends, I guess even in Pakistan, if you go to upper class Pakistani educated in Oxford, then you make it pass at somebody's sister in a certain milieu, or whatever, you make a joke. I'm sure it will be accepted when you go to the religious poor milieu. The reception is different. So there are these codes depending on class and religion and places. But in general, in Lebanon, I think also it's about class. You might see intermarriages in certain classes, wealthy, very progressive kind of values, permissible sexuality, etc. And different classes. So I think you have to be a bit of a chameleon depending on the situation where you are.
How, once this book was published in Canada, did your own ability to code shift change? How, once this book was published in Canada, did your ability to shift codes depending on where you were change, or did it not change at all?
How the reception, you mean, in Canada? How the book is interpreted in different...
Not so much. I think what I'm asking is, once your identity shifted from that of being a struggling artist to a successful artist, did you find your ability to move within layers of society change, and how did that change your perception of the society that you had adopted as your own?
Success is horrible. You have to be very careful. It's a curse, actually. I mean, you have to be, you have to protect yourself. But I'm still as angry as ever. So that goes. That's my protection, I think. First you find yourself in certain milieu that was not yours. I don't know. Again, I don't want to boast, but I managed to keep, to a certain extent, my privacy. I still have my same old friends, but it helps to be paranoid too. There's a space you really have to protect. There's a lot of intrusion too. I find you lose a bit of your privacy, and what they say, people think they know you, and those who know you, there's a problem with that. But also, opened the great door and so many in these events, and so many interesting other writers and people. The thing I regret the most is I tried to be a non-literary writer and I failed. It's not because because I don't have the knowledge of this, but I'm not good at writing non-fiction. Something that I tried and I failed, and I only feel that I can express my political views in literature. So, and I didn't think that I will come to that point. I sort of kind of retreated into becoming just a novelist, not a spokesman, certain things. That's why I admire Mona so much. I think she's our hero, representative. It's a special skill. It's a different skill. Rabia would tell you it's not necessary, and they tell you it's better not to. But it's I don't know why it bothers me so much, but it does.
You would think that writing the books would be enough.
Well, an article about certain views in the Guardian. I did write a couple of essays, which I presented in a, academic milieu. Maybe I'll try to do that a bit more. But like becoming a mouthpiece for certain causes, and or for a region, or for that, I'm not convinced. Maybe I don't know. I haven't taken that role.
Well, we've been going for an hour, and I suspect some of you might have questions of Rawi. And I'm just going to prattle on here for 20 to 30 seconds as someone in the audience, I haven't paid anyone, raises their hand. It's a real pleasure to have him all the way here you came from Beirut, didn't you? Or did you come from Canada?
Oh, I came from Canada, from Montreal.
So now's your chance if you have a question.
Yeah, I'm
All right, there's a question in the back. It doesn't need a microphone.
Okay, Mr. Ravi, hello, welcome to Sarajevo. It's a real pleasure to have you here and to meet you and to hear about your experiences. Actually, I was going to ask as well, how did you emigrate to the States and then to Canada? I will say that I read your novel, your roman Cockroach, It was
Oh, cockroach,
a
yes.
cockroach, yes.
Yeah.
I didn't read this one, so I will not have any questions about this novel. And what could I ask you? Maybe I could say a joke, because I realize that you like jokes, yes?
What? The joke? I'm sorry. She's going to tell a joke. Oh, please, yes.
Can I
By
tell
all
you?
means, yes.
Okay, so the joke may seem a little bit racistic, because here we are a quite gypsy, non-friendly society, yes? So I will tell you this joke. You will probably know, as you're from Beirut, there is something called abdest, yes? It's a ritual washing before the prayer in Islam, okay? You understand?
Yes, yes, I do.
So a gypsy came to the mosque, and the priest, Islamic priest, asked him, "Hey, did you take the abdest?" And he said, "No, no, it wasn't me, I swear." I hope
Sorry, I
you
didn't
understood.
hear the joke. It's not that I don't understand it. But if you know. Oh.
I'm really sorry if you didn't understand. I just wanted to say something.
I didn't hear it.
Well,
That's not. I didn't understand it. I didn't hear it. But okay, maybe you can tell it to me later. Sorry for that.
Okay, maybe some of your colleagues can tell it to you. Okay.
Ravi.
Oh, Rabia.
Okay, so for me, what stuck about what you said was that some are privileged to be able to reference books while I'm not. Do you remember saying that?
Some are privileged to.
Some writers are privileged to. You said that.
Well, I was. Yeah, but what writers?
This is my question. Why are you being evasive? Who do you think is privileged to reference books?
White writers. White writers. Oh, okay. It's an omission. I can expand on that. I'm not hiding anything. Burns. Help me out here. Burns. Burns. What's his name? The British writer. Burns. No. Julian Barnes, right? Barnes. I'm mispronouncing that. He's, when he writes a short book of 70 pages, and very apolitical, etc., he's revered. You and I try to write a book like this. We'll be ignored. We'll be lynched. We'll be lynched. I don't think we can afford that luxury. Not I'm saying that intentionally I inject political issues and that comes naturally, but I don't think we have that luxury. Do you agree with me or you don't?
Oh, no, I agree.
No, okay. Okay, just okay. Oh, too diplomatic. Okay, yeah, fine. Okay.
In the back with a green sweater.
Is there another joke in the audience?
You talked briefly about the overlap between your photography and your writing and how you made this journey from photographer to writer. And it made me think about another artist, Walid Rad from Lebanon, who also mixes the literary and the visual.
Walid Rad?
Yeah, Walid Rad, I might be mispronouncing
The Atlas
it.
Group? The Atlas
Group,
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
exactly.
yes.
And I was wondering whether this kind of interdisciplinary work is something you see commonly in post-conflict society, whether when you were talking about your attempt to represent trauma, whether working sort of between genres and working in an interdisciplinary way, does that somehow relate?
I know Walid. I always tell him he should write novels because there's a lot of narration in his book and wit too. And, I think he has that sense of humor that you find here, probably in Sarajevo or and Sarajevo, and that same sense of absurdity. We understand absurdity. Sasha was saying about tragic comedy, etc. I always told him he should write novels. I think he would be a great novelist. Yes, I think I might change subject here. I don't know how to answer your question, but you remind me of something. I think when the war ended in Lebanon,
there was no consensus on what happened. There were many narratives. So and we didn't come to terms. Nobody talked. The war ended very. It was brisk, and we didn't understand. The war ended, and the government didn't want to talk about it. Certainly, the clergy didn't want to talk about it as if nothing happened. People were tired. They just wanted to live a bit of a nihilist existence, which is very normal. And the only people who, I think, preserved that memory, though it's a fictitious memory, and that's where Walid Ra'ad comes. All his work is fiction. Atlas Group, it's a fictitious organization that records, documents the Lebanese Civil War. But they're all made up stories, which is, I think, wasn't a compromise, but I think it's the most natural extension of what happened. Since there's no consensus what happened, there's no official story. I think artists, writers took it upon themselves to write that history. Though it's a fictitious history, but nevertheless, I think subconsciously we decided to write something about it. Instead of having an alternative where nobody's talking about it, so we're making noise. Yeah, I'm sure. Documentary filmmakers did document certain things right after the war. But if you look at the Lebanese, and especially Akram Zatari, Walid Ra'ad, Lamia Shreish, if you look at what they have in commonality, it's they wrote fiction. I mean, they're visual artists who dealt with the Lebanese war in a fictitious form, and of course, writers too. I mean, it's obvious what we did, novelists, etc. But yeah, they're an impressive group that came out of Beirut. They're very, very impressive.
Hi, I just wanted to comment on a lot of writers in the States who write about immigrant experience.
About what?
Immigrant experience. I don't know, I started reading from Juno Diaz, who was born in the Dominican Republic, and then Herman, who writes about his experience in Sarajevo, and then you, who write about Lebanese immigrants in the States. How important is writing about that in English now with the immigrant crisis?
How important is it to write in English?
Writing about immigrants, right?
Yeah, in English.
Immigrant experience.
Oh, in
English
English.
is not your first language.
Right. How important? Or yeah. I mean, I think we had this conversation, me and Rabia. We exchange ideas once in a while. And he said to me, we're not Arab writers. We're, what did you say, Rabia? We're cosmopolitan. What were we?
Something.
We're something. We're, something other writers. So, yeah. I mean,
Transnational writers? Sorry, transnational?
thank you. That's the word I'm looking for. Yeah, I think Rabia used specifically that word, transnational writers. But I don't think we write all about that. I think I wrote 3 books. One of them is about the immigrant experience. My last book has nothing to do with Lebanon. But, I mean, yes, but we have that. We have that baggage that's hard not to surface. It's probably with damage somewhere because of the war. I think it precipitates no matter how much we try to be novelist or so there is that weight. Why we write in English? Circumstances. I have no ideological affiliation to English, I assure you. It's just circumstances. I left at the age of 18, I ended up in New York, and English became my language. And when I moved to Canada, to Francophone province, I went to school in English. I did my academic years in English, so it was an extension of that. Yeah, that question comes very frequently. You know, I was accused in Le Devoir in Quebec that I chose to write in English, not in French, because it's more lucrative, which is true. But I don't think that was, you know, that was my intention. Just circumstantial.
She has to, what is the significance of writing about immigration during the current immigration crisis? As in, does your book become, not this book, but more Cockroach, become more political or edged in that context? And are you any more ready to claim that silo for the book, given the way that the immigration crisis is talked about, debated, and used for political purposes? I think, is that what you were saying?
I'm sorry, I still don't understand the question. I must be tired. It must be stupid. I don't know.
Let's just stop there.
No, please, I won't sleep tonight. I mean,
I think
would I write another book about immigration,
No,
or
but
would I?
given that
with the context of, you know?
Did you? Are you any more ready to sort of embrace the category of writing about the immigrant experience, given the way that the immigrant crisis is unfolding and being talked about?
I think before the refugee experience, I think I wrote Cockroach, so I dealt with that. Would I write another book about? No, I think at this moment it's the responsibility of the journalistic realm. I don't think at this time writing another book about an immigrant experience will have the same impact. I think it will be competing with, you know, many other, the actual, and part of me afraid to be opportunistic. I think what we need now, and I'm kind of convinced, we need to promote culture more. I think there's enough in the art community. I think there are enough educated people from, especially this new generation. I look at Palestinians, I look at Syrians who very cosmopolitan in the diaspora. They're very educated. They're more eloquent at presenting, you know, the situation than I am. I remember when I was living in New York, you know, you have this academic Israeli competing with, you know, on TV with a guy who is, you know, has a grocery store, you know, who barely speak English. But now you have a new generation, very educated Arab diaspora, and I think they should. I think now we should cultivate an atmosphere of I think we're entitled to it. With culture, I think, arts, culture, etc. Why not? Maybe it's premature, but I don't think it's premature. I think we have this, you know, religious presence, this fundamentalism in religious presence, because the artistic community in the Arab world was either chased away, crushed, became poor exiles. Conservatism didn't host them. So you know, I think we should emphasize that presence. I've been, you know, again boasting, and stop me if I'm talking about myself too much. But I've been to 30 countries. The Canadians, there's always some kind of representative, or you know, with all, you know, the accomplishment, I never saw one Lebanese diplomat showing up or inviting me to a cocktail. They're horrible. I think Rabia would testify to that. They're anti-intellectual. They look at us with suspicion. They don't know what to do with us. They don't know. I don't know if they know of our existence. Sri Lanka, I don't know, Cambodia, they sell the missionary, and I used to sit also, I'm gonna cry, go to this international festival, I saw Sri Lanka contingency of diplomats celebrating their writers, etc. I never saw one Arab diplomat. It's incredible. And I never forgive them for that. They're vicious. They're conservative, vicious. They're vicious. Once, when I met an ambassador, I gave it to him. I really gave it to him. I really told him everything I think. That's why I think they fear thought. Basically, they fear thought, and that's why I think our presence is more necessary now than ever.
Sorry.
Thank you. How much did your American life experience influence your writing?
Yeah, like I said, it was very hard time, and I think that kind of theme of isolation, etc., and the poverty, etc., it surfaces in my writing a lot, and that comes probably from that American experience. But America at the time, New York at the time, was a great city. It was a very great city too. Graffitis everywhere. I remember you go to Soho. Soho was still not this real estate, a place they turned it into. You had actually distributed studios and people still living there and painting, etc. It was different times.
I'm sure there might be some more questions, but I think at this point it might be best to break, to thank Rawi Hage, and to tell you really with all my heart, the books are out there, and there's a world of pleasure and pain in between those covers, and I cannot recommend you to go pick it up more strongly. Rawi Hage, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Molimo da ostanete s nama na posljednjoj promociji večeras.